Too long didn't watch. Upscaling anything beyond the resolution it was made at won't add more detail. It will make the image look sharper, but it won't add detail. Number two, increasing the saturation and hue won't make the scene look better. It'll make the scene look worse in most situations. Like the people who make these 4K edits, they're not compositing artists. They're not adding composite layers. They're literally just sliding a bar forward. Number three, 60 FPS anime. It's just really fucking stupid. Let's get into the video now. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So my first point was that upscaling anything beyond the resolution that was made at, it won't really add any more detail. It will add sharpness, but it won't add any more detail. This is of course not true with like 3D imagery, like video games. In video games, if you go up the resolution, it will add more detail. And the detail that it's adding is by removing jagged edges. Technically not really adding detail, but yeah, it's at least removing the jagged edges or aliasing. Of course, upping resolution is super hard on your PC, so you can't really up the resolution all the time. So what you can do is use anti-aliasing techniques. But in anime, a person is drawing these images at a specific resolution. So when you upscale that, how the hell are you going to get more detail? It makes no sense. Of course, the anime that we're consuming, it's already upscaled. If you didn't know that, most anime is not even made at 1080p. Most anime is made at around the 720p range, 720p or 756p or something like that. Shows like Fire Force, I'm not sure about this, but I think Fire Force was made at 900p. And Violet Evergarden is like the only anime I know of that was made in 1080p. It was made for Netflix, so maybe that's the reason. But as far as 1080p goes, Violet Evergarden is it. And of course, there are movies that are made in 1080p. But other than that, most shows are just natively made at 720p and upscaled to 1080p before they're released in Crunchyroll and stuff. So since Violet Evergarden was natively made at 1080p, if you lower the resolution, if you watch it at like 720p, you will lose detail, not just sharpness, but detail that was intended to be there would look jagged or wouldn't look as good as it would if it looked at 1080p. Of course, there's also the idea of bitrate, which is equally important as the resolution is, which I'll get to in the fucking 4K edits section. But yeah, bitrate needs to be high and resolution needs to be high in case it's made at a higher resolution. So 1080p is also like a standard, like every anime creator can just look at 1080p and be like, oh, like doesn't matter what we make our show at, we can just upscale it to 1080p. And that's a good thing because then every show will be at a particular resolution. It'll be made in a different resolution, but the final product will be the same resolution. So it's easy for distribution. So Fire Force and Tower of God, when you were watching it, both of them are at 1080p. But are they actually 1080p? No. Fire Force is 900p and Tower of God is 830.5p. Yeah, decimal resolution. That's right. Try watching Megalobox. It's an anime that's pretty good, so you can watch it if you want. Otherwise, you can just go to Sakugaboro and just look at the action scenes. So a Megalobox was made in native 480p or something that's definitely a lower resolution because they wanted to keep the old school feel. It's like a remastered version, not really a remaster, like a reimagination of the old boxing anime called Ashita no Jo. So they wanted to keep like the old school feel by making it native 480p. And even when you're watching it in 1080p, like the upscaled version that's commercially available to you, it still doesn't look good. It's upscaled, but it looks blurry and just doesn't look very nice. Oh, so what you should do is just watch it at 480p, right? No. Because when you're watching it at 480p, what you're watching is not the 480p version that they made for you. You're watching the 480p version that is downscaled from the upscaled 1080p of the native 480p version. I hope that makes sense. So the studio makes it in 480p, then upscaled to 1080p for commercial use. Then if you download like a 480p version of it, then it is downscaled from that 1080p version. So what you'll get is an even blurrier, jagged mess of a video. So to get all of the 480p detail, that the studio intended the viewer to see, you need to watch it at 1080p. So don't think like, oh, since Jujutsu Kaisen is made at 720p, I'll just download a 720p print and that'll be it. I won't really miss any detail in it. No, you will miss detail because the 720p version that you're getting is a downscaled version of the 1080p video. If you're watching the true 720p version that the studio released, then you can just choose to watch that and you won't miss out on any details than if you watch the 1080p version. And upscaling beyond 1080p absolutely will not make a difference to the image. Like if you have a 4K TV or a 4K monitor, just watch it in 1080p. You won't really see any jagged lines or aliasing or anything. You won't see that. I'll explain it with an example now so that it's easier to understand. It's not really a perfect example because the process of upscaling, it's not really similar at all, but it gets the idea across. And that's what I want you people to understand. The idea of why upscaling makes no sense. Okay, so I'm going to use this drawing as the example here. Yes, I drew this. Yes, it only took me 15 hours. But yeah, I drew this with micron pens, with brush pens, and then like Deku's hair here is just pencil shading. Like I couldn't get really a filter for it. All this area is just pencil shading. So now, if I take this and scan this into my PC with no loss of detail, right? I scan it as it is to my PC. Got it. So once I scan it to my PC, I upscale it to fucking 32K resolution, make it a 1 gigabyte file, right? So now I've made it way sharper than the image that I scanned into my computer. And then now I print this final product, this fucking 32K image that's 1 GB big. I print that out. So now would that printed upscaled version have more detail than my original version? No, obviously not. Because it makes no sense for the detail to just magically increase if I just click a fucking render button to upscale the image. That makes no sense. I'm not redrawing it. If I redrew it at like a higher resolution, I don't know if that's possible. Yes, I could draw it like in a bigger canvas, the same thing. So like the thin lines would now be slightly thicker because the entire image is bigger. So I'm drawing it technically like a higher resolution, but yeah, that's it. I'll have to redraw the entire thing. Upscaling won't really add more detail. And I'm getting to my point on bitrate. Like these YouTube videos that you see of like 4K edits, they're completely pointless because yeah, even if you think you're getting a sharper image, because as I said, yes, upscaling will give a sharper image even if there's no detailing, and maybe you just like the extra sharpness. That's fine, you like the extra sharpness. But it still doesn't matter because YouTube compression is so aggressive, even with 4K content, that even at 4K upscaled, it will look less sharper than the 1080p native version of the video if you get it like an uncompressed file, like when you watch it legally or download like the 1.4 GB file per video. That will still look sharper than the 4K edits that you'll see on YouTube. And YouTube compression is just so aggressive that yeah, you will lose sharpness. It doesn't matter even if it's upscaled to 4K. You can't control the bitrate of uploading. So yeah, watching anime at 4K is absolutely meaningless. It won't add any detail whatsoever, and it won't add any sharpness either because you're watching it on YouTube where compression is very aggressive. Unless you are the one upscaling it yourself. Like if you get a 1080p video file and you are the one upscaling it to 4K and then you're just watching it on your PC, fine. Yeah, it will look way sharper than the original version, but also won't have any more detail. So it's kind of like, do you really want to do that? Like, why do you want to do that? It makes no difference. In the YouTube side of things, it's fucking ridiculous. I blame you, the viewers, just as much as the people who make these 4K edits. I don't blame you specifically because you're watching my content, so you must be pretty smart. But for the average viewer, they see 4K, oh my god, big number. I want to see what anime looks like in 4K. No, you're not looking at what anime looks like in 4K. You're watching what anime looks like at 1080p, just upscaled. It's gotten to the point where genuinely good AMVs, they're not getting as much attention as these 4K edits. And yeah, these 4K edits get millions of views, especially with Demon Slayer. Demon Slayer, obviously, because it has such a high number of normie audience. And I don't blame the creators of these 4K videos necessarily, because some of them are edited genuinely well. It's pretty good editing, like with the mixing with music and stuff. It looks good. It's a good experience. But if they just said that, if the title said Tanjiro versus Rui edit, it would not get as many views as Tanjiro versus Rui 4K. Normies will obviously want to click on that shit, and it's a vicious cycle that keeps continuing, like Ouroboros, like the man who fucks himself in the ass. Of course, some of these videos, this is my second point, some of these videos, the editing that they do is just upping the saturation and the hue, and it looks like dog shit. Here's an example. Yes, that is a mobile phone app that they're using to upscale the video to 4K. The mobile that they're using does not even have a 4K display, unless they are using like a Sony phone. Then yeah, it has a 4K display. But other than that, they're editing on a phone that does not support native 4K. Oh, damn. I know I was talking about how this is a bad idea, but damn, I saw that, and yeah, like, he changed me. Now I'm a believer of overly saturated, ugly looking animation. Nice. You're not a composite artist. You're simply clicking on a slider and then sliding it forward. It takes no talent, and you're just making the final image look uglier. Why? Just stop doing that. If you want to upscale shit to 4K, go ahead, fucking do it, but don't change the look of the show. Now, obviously, this is not an open invitation for you to go attack these people making these edits. Educate them if you want. Like, tell them, like, doing this is kind of meaningless. You can just make AMVs, and I would enjoy watching the AMVs. And definitely don't go attacking actual compositing artists. For example, the Color Owl. I really highly recommend the Color Owl's channel. His content is amazing. Like, he's not just upping the saturation, though he does also play with colors like that. But most of the stuff he does is just genuine compositing. Sometimes it just doesn't look as good as the original to me. That's personal preference. But other times, you can't help but say, yeah, that's objectively better than the original. If the original looked like that, I would enjoy that content more. The goal is never defamation. It's always education. Don't be an asshole. Don't go out of your way to be an asshole to anyone. Just tell them nicely as to why they're wrong. And if they don't agree with you, okay, let them be. It's fine. You don't have to attack anyone. And now getting to the third point about the 60 FPS edits. People who make 60 FPS videos, you are fucking retarded. You are the dumbest fucking people on the goddamn planet. I would put you up with flat earthers in terms of stupidity. 4K 60 FPS remaster. You're not remastering shit, you dumb cunt. You're just making the animators' work worthless by just completely ruining all the effort they're putting into it. I don't really want to talk a lot about this because of two reasons. One, it pisses me off so much that I will just fucking... And yeah, anyway, the second reason I don't want to talk about it is because Noodle has made a very good video. It's a very popular video on why smoother animation does not equal better animation. And he's an animator himself, and he goes really in depth as to why interpolation is stupid and the people who make these interpolated edits are fucking retarded troglodytes. He doesn't actually say that. He's nice about it. And yeah, that's exactly why I don't want to talk about it. So being angry as fuck is making me really hot, so I switched on the ceiling fan. This is a good experimental segment to see if my mic picks up my voice over the ceiling fan that's really fucking loud. So hopefully it does. So anyway, about motion blur techniques in anime. In real life, there is motion blur, obviously, which is just natural motion. If I do this really fast, yeah, you can tell I'm moving it and it's pretty blurry. And even in real life, if I'm viewing my hand, I can see that I'm moving it very fast, such that it's getting deformed. In anime, you don't have that. Since you're drawing everything, you have to use techniques to depict motion blur. This can be done by using smears. Smears is just a combination of stretching, squashing. It can be done by multiples. Multiples is also like a type of smear, but multiples is just used more in cartoons. It is also used in anime, but rarely. And there's also literal motion blur in anime where you just blur the stuff on the screen. Ufotable does this a lot because Ufotable shots don't have all that many smears outside of when they're veteran animators like Masayuki Kunihiro and Nozomu Abe are animating. Then there's a lot of smears, but generally they don't have all that many smears. So to depict motion, they just use literal motion blur by blurring out the screen. And also with CGI. In Attack on Titan, the final season, you'll see a lot of motion blur with CGI, which makes sense. You can't really depict motion in CGI otherwise. Anyway, every animator has their own technique. All of these animators, they have their own techniques of depicting motion blur. Like when I see Arifumi Imai smears, I know that's Arifumi Imai smears. I can tell when Arifumi Imai or Yutaka Nakamura or Nozomu Abe are animating based on two things: their smears and their animation timing. Nozomu Abe's animation timing is very fluid. Most of the times he even animates it in ones, which is like a ridiculously high number of drawings, and his smears are like jagged lines. Yoshimichi Kamera, on the other hand, has a much more snappy timing. Yes, he uses fewer drawings. That doesn't mean his animation is worse than Nozomu Abe's. It's just a stylistic choice. And Kamera's smears are much more inky and sketchy, completely different from Nozomu Abe's style. The timing and the technique for smears is what makes the animators work. Interpolating animation takes both of these and throws it into the fucking dump. This is what Arifumi Imai's smears look like. They are extremely distorted. Some of it, when they're not all that distorted, they look very similar to Nozomu Abe's smears. Arifumi Imai has his own style of drawing smears and his own sense of timing. I'll take the example of Saitama vs. Genos that he animated. Now you interpolate this shit and check one of the in-between frames. Bruh. That is a beautiful in-between frame. That definitely looks like something Imai would draw. I don't know why you would want this. Anything over 24 FPS in commercial media is already completely unnecessary unless you're gaming, especially in anime. Of course, it's not just the smears. I also talked about timing. Timing is important to give the sense of weight in anime. I'll use this short example with Nakamura's scene of Bakugo escaping. This cut, which has awesome background animation, he animated in ones, and you can really feel the speed here. The timing is amazing because he animated it in ones. But towards the end of the cut, he's animating it in twos because he's slowing down, he's losing momentum. He is a character that has weight, so he has to obey the laws of physics. You need to emulate physics into anime so that it looks pleasing. Now, if this was interpolated, the fucking AI software does not know anything about this, so it'll just render the whole thing in 60 FPS. So Bakugo will just look like he's moving in the same speed all through the scene. It won't look like he's coming to a stop. It won't look like he has any weight whatsoever. I don't even need to use the example of hand-drawn anime. I can use the example of CGI. For example, in Attack on Titan, the final season, the CGI is rendered at like a lower frame rate. It's animated in twos, which means one drawing is held for 2 frames. So there will be 12 drawings per second because the anime we are watching is 24 FPS. But of course, this is not a drawing. This is like CGI animation. So here the CGI model is being held in the same position for 2 frames. So it moves and the next frame it does not change. It moves again and in the next frame it does not change. And it's actually pretty good. Some people dislike it for the reason that it lacks the sense of weight because CGI will just never convey the weight as well as 2D animation can. But I think the weight is pretty well done in Attack on Titan the final season, especially this scene where Eren is just ramming Galliard into the ground. They are CGI models, and the sense of weight, it's really good here. You can really feel the impact. On the other hand, X-Arm is rendered at a higher frame rate, and you can see there's a complete lack of the sense of weight here. There's nothing here. So these fucking morons who are making these 60 FPS anime, they're looking at X-Arm and then they're going, damn, higher FPS, that looks nice. I want to do that with hand-drawn animation. I'm sorry, I was watching that video of Sword of the Stranger 60 FPS, but it's by a channel that's called The Art of Animation. Oh, the sweet, sweet irony. It looks bad. Nakamura's sense of weight, everything that he used to make the fight look perfection, it is the best fight in anime. Watch Sword of the Stranger, please. It's got the best fight of anime. You gotta watch it. And this Art of Animation channel took that and made it 60 FPS, and it just It makes me cringe and makes me angry at the same time. This fucking video pisses me off. Not this video in particular, every fucking AI interpolation garbage, it pisses me off. And since Sword of the Stranger is like such a niche show, it's a very underrated show. And yeah, most of the people who watch it are people who love animation in the first place. So it's actually very cool to see that there are people calling this channel out on this shit. Like, these fight scenes would look better in the original FPS. Motion interpolation is a stupid idea that never actually made anything look any better. Part of the style of anime comes from its frame rate. Absolutely right. Totally agree with this. Yeah. You do realize that the movie itself is animated in 60 FPS. And this guy just says that it's not, obviously. Okay, calm down, Einstein. No one really notices this BS you're talking about. This video is legit. Ah, yes. These are the kind of comments that I really love. People who don't know anything. Their knowledge is a fucking zero on the subject. But they're like, I know what I'm talking about. No random person on the internet. It's very easy to notice. You are just completely uneducated in the subject. You don't know shit. And that's why you can't see it. It reminds me of like the Korean families defending Kim Jong-kook, saying that, no, he does not use PEDs. He clearly does. Anyone who's into fitness knows that he's probably taken PEDs. But these people who've never even sniffed the inside of a gym, somehow know better than the entire fitness community. Sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, but like similarly in this case, like these people don't know shit. Like, they don't know what they're talking about. So if there are any interpolation artists watching this video who are thinking, look at this fucking retard, he has no idea what he's talking about. He's making fun of the blood, sweat, and tears that I pour into importing anime clips into an interpolation software and then clicking on the render button. That takes hard work and dedication. The 60 FPS masterpieces that I create are much better than the original. So if there are any one of you who think that, I have a challenge for you. This is a scene animated by animator Satoshi Furuhashi from the anime Yama no Susume. And as you can probably tell, it has an extremely low number of drawings. Furuhashi has made this weighty, expressive movement by using an extremely low number of drawing count. So he had a vision on what he was going to do, and he had the keyframes to back it up. He has the talent to back it up. So this is the beginning. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He's animating in threes right now. Threes would be 8 FPS. Now he switched to fours. He's holding one drawing for 5 frames. And now back to threes. And this is just animated in threes again. So he started with twos, which is like a standard. Then he switched to threes and fours. And then he animated in fives. What is fives even? 5 FPS? Which is crazy that he was able to create such a unique, weighty sense of movement by using such a low drawing count. So the challenge is, turn that into 60 FPS. That is 4 FPS. Turn that into 60 FPS. So the AI will have to add 56 extra frames for that scene. The computer will just have a fucking stroke. All of you amazing interpolation artists should try using your God-gifted talent of having an AI add useless frames into the scene to make it 60 FPS, but you should try that and make it look better than the original, like you always do. And of course, this challenge is not obviously exclusive to interpolation artists. You can try this if you want, because yeah, it really takes no talent. You could download an interpolation software right now and then do it in like 10 minutes. It would take me 5 minutes to teach my mom how to do interpolation. And if you do end up creating it, make a video about it on YouTube. And if it is better than the original, I will make an apology video and then delete this video. And yeah, that's about it. That's the whole video. Hopefully you learned something. Like, if you were someone who used to enjoy watching 4K 60 FPS videos, I hope I've turned you into someone who knows why that's kind of unnecessary. I hope I've turned all of you into people who would go to comment section of 4K animated and tell them why it's not really necessary to do so, and go to 60 FPS anime edit videos and tell them to delete their channel. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. If you liked it a lot, then subscribe. If you did not like the video, then tell me down in the comment section on how I can improve. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks for the views.